The strange noise at midnight the night was silent, except for the soft hum of the wind outside Daniel's old wooden house. He lived alone, far from the busy streets, where the nights were usually quiet and calm. But this night was different. He woke up suddenly, his ears catching a sound that did not belong to the silence at first. He thought it was only the wind pushing against the windows, but then he heard it again, water running. The sound was faint, but steady, like a stream, flowing inside his home. Daniel frowned. He lived alone. No one else should be here. He sat up in bed, his heart beginning to beat faster. His house was small, with only a few rooms. It wasn't possible to get lost inside, and yet it felt like someone else was there. He reached for the flashlight on his nightstand, his fingers shaking slightly. The floor creaked under his weight as he stepped onto the cold wooden boards. Daniel held his breath and listened carefully. The sound was clearer now. Yes, it was water. Running water. From his bathroom, but how? He remembered clearly he had turned everything off before going to bed. Slowly, he walked down the short hallway. The air felt heavier, as if the house itself knew something was wrong. His grip tightened on the flashlight. His mind raced with thoughts. Could it be a leak? No, it sounded too strong. Could it be a thief? But why would a thief turn on the water? He got closer. His pulse quickened. The bathroom door was half open. A thin strip of light slipped through the crack, spreading across the floor like a warning. Daniel's throat went dry. He stood still for a moment, listening. The steady sound of water splashing filled his ears. He pushed the door slowly, and it opened with a quiet squeak. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dim light, and what he saw made him freeze in shock. Inside, standing under the shower, was a girl. Not just any girl, but an alien. Her frame was thin, almost fragile, and her clothes clung to her body, soaking wet. She wasn't washing properly, not with soap or care. She just stood there, letting the water run over her head and face, as if she wanted to drown the dirt away. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. The girl hadn't noticed him yet. She was whispering softly to herself, her voice trembling. "Please, let me wash. I'm so dirty. Just let me wash." Her voice broke with every word, filled with pain and fear. Her hands shook as she rubbed at her arms as though she was trying to scrub away years of filth. Her hair was messy, tangled with dust. Her skin was covered in marks, old and new. She looked young, maybe just out of her teenage years. But her eyes, when she finally turned and saw him, were wide with terror. The girl gasped, stepping back against the wall. Her whole body trembled like a cornered animal. She looked at him, as if she expected him to shout, to drag her out, to punish her for stepping inside his home. Her lips moved, and she stammered, I'm sorry. I just wanted to wash. I'll leave. I'll leave right now." Daniel didn't move. He couldn't. His brain was trying to understand what he was seeing. An alien girl, weak, frightened, and dirty, had broken into his house, not to steal food or money, but to take a shower. The silence between them stretched. The sound of water was the only noise in the room. Daniel lowered the flashlight a little, not wanting to scare her more. His heart still pounded, but he felt something else now. Not anger, not fear, but pity. Her clothes were torn, hanging loose from her thin body. She looked half-starved, her cheeks hollow, her hands bony. She had risked everything just to find a place with running water. That thought alone twisted Daniel's chest with unease. The girl's knees gave out, and she fell onto the wet floor. She covered her face with her hands and cried softly, shaking all over. Her voice cracked again as she whispered, "Please, don't send me away. Please, just let me finish. I'll go after this. I won't bother you again." Daniel stood frozen, caught between two worlds. On one hand, this was his home, his safe place, and she had broken in. On the other hand, she wasn't dangerous. She wasn't even fighting. She was begging, like someone who had nothing left but her tears. The flashlight in his hand grew heavy. His breath slowed as he finally realized the truth. This girl didn't come here to harm him. She came here because she had nowhere else to go, and in that silent, strange midnight moment, Daniel understood one thing. His life was about to change forever. The girl in the shower, Daniel stood frozen at the bathroom door, his flashlight still in his hand. The alien girl sat on the wet tiles, her clothes dripping with water. The shower kept running, steam slowly filling the small room. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Her voice shook as she whispered again, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break in. I just wanted to wash. I'm so dirty." Daniel lowered the flashlight so it wouldn't shine directly in her face. He could see her better now. Her skin was pale, almost grayish under the harsh bathroom light, and her big eyes shimmered with fear. Her hair clung to her face in wet strands. She wasn't armed. She wasn't dangerous. She was desperate. For a moment, Daniel didn't know what to say. His mind spun in circles. An alien girl here, in his home, begging for the simple chance to take a shower. It was so strange, yet so heartbreaking. He could see the dirt still smeared on her arms, even after the water. It looked like she hadn't been clean in months. The girl lowered her head, pressing her forehead against the tiles. "Please don't call anyone. They'll take me back. I'll leave, I promise. Just let me finish." Her shoulders shook as she cried quietly. Daniel took a step inside. The girl flinched, curling up tighter against the wall. She expected him to shout, to drag her out, maybe even strike her. Instead, Daniel knelt down slowly, setting the flashlight on the floor. His voice was calm, softer than he expected. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl blinked, surprised by the question. For a second, she hesitated, as if even saying her name might bring danger. Finally, she whispered, "Lyra." Daniel nodded. "Okay, Lyra, you don't need to be scared. I'm not going to hurt you." Her lips parted, but she didn't believe him yet. She had lived too long with fear. Daniel could see it in her eyes. She didn't trust words. She only trusted actions. He turned the water off. The silence felt heavy without the splashing sound. "You'll get sick if you sit in wet clothes," he said, standing up. "Wait here." He left the bathroom. His heart still pounded, but something inside him had shifted. This wasn't just some intruder. This was a lost soul. He opened his closet, pulled out an old sweater and a pair of sweatpants, then grabbed a towel. When he returned, she was still huddled against the wall, hugging her knees. Daniel placed the bundle of clothes and the towel gently on the counter. "These are clean. You can use them," he said quietly. Lyra stared at the clothes like they were something from another world. Her lips trembled. "Why? Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice broken. Daniel hesitated. He didn't have a clear answer. Maybe because she looked so fragile. Maybe because no one should have to beg for water. Maybe because in her eyes, he saw someone who had already suffered too much. "Because you look like you need it," he finally said. Tears welled up again in her eyes. She reached out slowly, her thin fingers brushing against the towel, as if she thought it might disappear. She pulled it to her chest, holding it tightly, and whispered, "Thank you." Daniel turned away to give her privacy. He stepped out of the bathroom and closed the door behind him. His thoughts were heavy. What was happening? Why was an alien girl in his house, starving and dirty, begging for a shower? Where had she come from? Who had hurt her so badly that she was this afraid? Minutes passed. He heard her moving inside. The rustle of fabric as she changed into the dry clothes. When she finally stepped out, Daniel almost didn't recognize her. The sweater hung loose on her small frame, and the sweatpants were too big, but she looked warmer, safer. Her hair was still damp, but her face looked softer now, less haunted. She didn't meet his eyes at first. She stood in the hallway clutching the towel like it was a shield. Her voice was barely audible when she asked, "Do I need to leave now?" Daniel studied her. He thought of sending her away after all. She had broken into his home. But then he imagined her. Outside again, wandering the cold night, dirty, starving, afraid. The thought twisted his stomach. "No," Daniel said at last. "You can stay. For now." Lyra's eyes widened, disbelief clear on her face. She looked at him as if she couldn't understand what he had just offered. Nobody had ever given her kindness like this before. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Daniel sighed. "Come on, you need food?" Her stomach growled loudly at the mention of food, and her face turned red with embarrassment. She looked down, too ashamed to answer, but her body betrayed her hunger. Daniel walked into the kitchen, pulling open the fridge. He wasn't rich. His meals were simple. But he could at least give her something warm. As he cooked, Lyra stood in the corner, watching him like a frightened animal ready to run if anything went wrong. When he finally placed a bowl of soup in front of her, she hesitated again, staring at it. Slowly, carefully, she lifted the spoon to her lips. The first sip made her eyes widen, and then she ate faster, as though afraid someone might take it away. Daniel watched silently. Every bite she took made his decision clearer. This girl was not a threat. She was someone who needed help, and somehow she had found her way to his door. Her begging voice the kitchen was quiet, except for the soft clink of the spoon against the bowl. Lyra ate carefully at first, like every bite might be her last. Daniel sat across from her, watching silently. He didn't push her with questions. He didn't demand answers. He just let her eat. But he could see it in her eyes. Fear still lingered. Every time the old house creaked, she stiffened. Every time he moved too quickly, her shoulders tensed. She was ready to run at any moment. When the bowl was empty, she set the spoon down slowly, as if afraid the sound might anger him. Her hands shook slightly, and her lips moved, but no words came out. Daniel leaned back, waiting. He had learned long ago that silence could make people speak more than questions. Finally, her voice broke the stillness. It was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "Please, don't send me away." Daniel blinked. Her big eyes were locked on him, wide and full of tears. She slid down from the chair onto her knees on the floor, her small hands clutching the edge of the table like a prisoner begging a guard. "I'll do anything," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll clean, I'll stay quiet, I'll never cause trouble. Just don't throw me out into the street, please." Her words hit Daniel like a stone in the chest. He wasn't used to someone begging like this, not for money, not for favors, but simply for a place to exist. She wasn't asking for comfort. She wasn't asking for love. She was asking for survival. Daniel stood slowly, his chair scraping back across the wooden floor. Lyra flinched at the sound, covering her head with her arms as if expecting a blow. The sight made his stomach twist. Whoever had raised her, whoever had treated her like this, had broken something deep inside her. He spoke gently. "Lyra, stand up." She shook her head, still on her knees. "No, please. I'll beg if I must. Just let me stay. I won't be a burden. I can disappear into a corner. I don't need much." Her voice cracked on the last words, and the tears finally fell down her cheeks. Daniel bent down, reaching out. Slowly, carefully, he touched her shoulder. She flinched hard, but didn't pull away. "You don't have to beg me," he said softly. "I'm not throwing you out." Lyra lifted her head, her wet eyes searching his face for lies. You mean it? Daniel nodded. I mean it. She broke then. The sobs came out heavy, raw, from a place so deep that it echoed through the quiet house. Daniel let her cry, sitting back against the wall as she poured out years of pain into the wooden floor. Minutes passed before her voice returned, soft and trembling. They called me useless, she whispered. They said I was too weak, too dirty, too small. My family, they abandoned me. My people, they spit on me. I had no one. No one would even let me touch clean water. That's why. I broke into your house. I just wanted to feel clean for once. Daniel listened in silence, his fist clenched without him realizing. He wanted to curse whoever had done this to her, but anger wouldn't help her now. She needed something else. You don't have to explain, he said finally. You needed help, and I was here. Her lips trembled. She wanted to believe him, but she had been betrayed too many times before. She stared at him for a long moment, her voice trembling again. If I stay, she whispered, I'll work for you. I'll be useful. I'll wash floors. I'll fetch water. I'll cook. I'll do anything. Just don't make me leave. Please. Her begging voice filled the room like a fragile song, every word breaking his heart a little more. Daniel shook his head. Lyra, you don't need to earn your place here. You're not a servant. You're not trash. You're just someone who needs kindness. That's enough. Her eyes widened. She didn't understand. Kindness was something foreign, something she had never been given without a price. Slowly, she asked, why? Why would a human care? My own kind never did. Daniel looked at her, his voice steady, 'cause it's the right thing to do. For the first time since she entered his house, Lyra's face softened. The fear in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something fragile hope. She wiped at her tears with shaky hands and whispered, I'll try. I'll try not to be a burden. Daniel offered a small smile. You're not a burden. The words seemed to settle in her chest like a seed, something that might grow if given enough time. She nodded slowly, clutching the oversized sweater closer to her body. That night, Daniel set up a small bed for her on the couch with blankets and pillows. She sat down carefully, as if she didn't believe it was real. She whispered, thank you, again and again until exhaustion pulled her into sleep. Daniel stood by the doorway, watching her. The house, once silent and lonely, now felt different. A stranger had entered his life, not with violence or greed, but with begging eyes and broken words. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Abeski knew this. He could not turn his back on her. As the night deepened, Daniel whispered to himself, You're safe now, Abes. No one will hurt you here. And for the first time in years, the girl slept without fear. A meal shared morning sunlight pushed through the thin curtains, painting soft golden lines across the small kitchen table. Daniel had already been awake, boiling water for tea and slicing bread. The night had been long, and his mind still carried the weight of the strange event. An alien girl, shivering and broken, had begged to stay in his house, and he had let her. He turned when he heard small footsteps behind him. Lyra stood in the doorway, wrapped tightly in his oversized sweater, her damp hair now tangled but dry. She looked unsure, like a child caught where she didn't belong. Her bare feet shifted nervously on the floor. Good morning, Daniel said softly. His voice was calm, gentle, as if he was talking to someone who might break if he spoke too. Loudly, Lyra nodded slowly but didn't answer. Her eyes darted around, scanning the room as though expecting to be chased out at any moment. Sit down, Daniel said, pointing to the chair at the table. Breakfast's ready. She hesitated. Her lips parted as if she wanted to protest. But hunger betrayed her. Her stomach growled loud enough for Daniel to hear. Her cheeks flushed red, and she lowered her head in shame. Daniel pretended not to notice. He placed a plate in front of her warm bread, a little butter, and a bowl of soup left over from the night before. To him, it was a simple meal. To her, it looked like treasure. Still, she didn't reach for it right away. She sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the food like it was forbidden. "You can eat," Daniel said, gently pushing the plate closer. Her voice came out as a whisper. "For me, yes," Daniel replied. "For you," her fingers trembled as she reached for the bread. She held it like it might vanish, like a dream she didn't want to wake from. She took a small bite, chewing slowly. Then another. And another. Soon she was eating faster, unable to stop herself. Daniel watched quietly. Every bite she took told him more about her past. She had starved before. She had lived without food for days, maybe weeks. She ate not with greed, but with desperation, like someone trying to fill an empty void inside. Halfway through the bowl of soup, she paused. Her hand froze, and her wide eyes lifted to Daniel. "Am I taking too much?" she asked, her voice shaking. Daniel frowned. "No, Lyra, you're not taking too much. Eat as much as you need." Her shoulders loosened a little, though she still looked unsure. She lowered her gaze again and whispered, "No one ever let me eat first before. I always had to wait, and sometimes nothing was left." The words hit Daniel like a punch. He clenched his jaw, hiding the anger burning inside him, not at her, but at the world that had treated her this way. "You don't have to wait here," he said. "There will always be food for you in this house." Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment she forgot to eat. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't only from pain. They were from something softer, something she hadn't felt in a long time: kindness. She whispered, "Why are you being so good to me? Even my own people never were." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He didn't know how to answer in fancy words. He only knew the truth. Because it's the right thing to do. Nobody should have to beg just to eat. Her gaze lingered on him, searching his face as though trying to catch a hidden trick. But there was none. She finally lowered her head again, finishing the food with slower, calmer bites. When she was done, she sat back in the chair, holding the empty bowl close to her chest as though it were precious. She didn't ask for more, even though Daniel could tell she was still hungry. It was in the way her eyes glanced at the bread on the counter, then quickly looked away. He pushed the plate toward her again. "Take it," he said. She shook her head quickly. "No, I shouldn't. You'll need it." Daniel almost smiled. "Lyra, I have more food. You don't have to starve here. Eat." Her lips trembled, and after a long pause, she took the bread. She ate slower this time, savoring every bite, her eyes softening with each mouthful. When she finally finished, silence filled the kitchen again. But it wasn't the heavy silence of fear. It was lighter, warmer, looked at him with wide eyes, still clutching the bowl. "I don't understand you, human." "Why do you care?" Daniel shrugged, his voice steady. "Because you needed help. Because no one else gave it to you." The words hung in the air, simple but powerful. That morning, something shifted between them. Lyra still sat with her back straight, still watched every move with caution, but in her eyes there was now a small spark. A spark of trust. For the first time in years, she had shared a meal not in fear, not in shame, but in the quiet company of someone who saw her as more than dirt, more than a burden. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching her as she clutched the empty bowl like a treasure. He didn't know what dangers tomorrow would bring, but as the golden light filled the room, he knew one thing: this girl was no longer a stranger, and neither of them would face hunger or loneliness alone again. Trust slowly grows. The days that followed were strange for Daniel. His quiet house, which had always been filled with silence, now carried the sound of soft footsteps, the clink of dishes being washed, and the occasional rustle of movement when Lyra thought she was unseen. At first, she acted like a shadow. She moved carefully, always staying close to the walls, her big eyes watching everything with caution. When Daniel entered a room, she would freeze, her thin body stiff like she was bracing for punishment. Daniel noticed how she woke before him every morning. She would fold the blankets neatly on the couch, as if afraid he might scold her for leaving. A mess. She even tried sweeping the floor with an old broom she found in the corner, though her hands shook as she worked. "You don't have to do that," Daniel said one morning, finding her bent over the broom, her head lowered. "I need to. If I don't, you'll throw me out." Daniel sighed. "I told you, you don't have to earn your place here." She didn't reply, but her hands kept sweeping. To her, work was the only way to deserve kindness. At meals, Daniel noticed she always waited for him to eat first. She would stare at her food, not touching it until he took the first bite. And even then, she ate slowly, carefully, as if she feared she might be seen as greedy. One evening, Daniel set 2 bowls of soup on the table. He sat down but didn't eat. Lyra sat across from him, staring at her bowl. Minutes passed, and neither of them moved. Finally, Daniel leaned forward. "You're waiting for me, aren't you?" he asked, her cheeks turned red. She looked down at her lap. It's how I was taught." Daniel shook his head. "Not here. In this house, you don't have to wait. We eat together." Her eyes lifted, searching his face. He gave her a small nod. Slowly, uncertainly, she lifted her spoon and took the first sip. It was such a small thing, but to Daniel, it was the first crack in the wall of fear she had built around herself. As the days turned into weeks, more cracks began to show. He caught her humming once while cleaning the dishes. The sound was soft, almost like she didn't know she was doing it. The moment she noticed him standing there, she froze, her lips snapping shut. "That was nice," Daniel said, her eyes widened. "I wasn't supposed to. You can hum all you want." He interrupted gently. Her face softened, and for the first time, he saw the hint of a smile tug at her lips. Another evening, Daniel found her outside in the garden. She knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds with her thin hands. She looked up when he approached, panic flashing in her eyes. "I was just trying to help," she stammered. Daniel crouched beside her. "You don't need to," he said. "But if you want to, you can." Her hands stilled. "I want to." From that day, she worked in the garden often. It gave her something to focus on, something to build instead of destroy. And Daniel noticed how her movements changed. At first, they were rushed, shaky, but as time passed, she grew calmer, slower, more careful. Nights were still hard for her. Daniel sometimes heard her cry softly when she thought he was asleep. The sound of muffled sobs drifted from the couch. He never interrupted. He knew some wounds needed time, but he made sure to leave a glass of water on the table near her bed. And every morning, it was empty. Slowly, trust began to grow like a fragile flower between them. One night, as they sat by the small fire in the living room, Daniel noticed Lyra staring into the flames. Her voice came out quiet but steady. "No one ever gave me this before," she said. Daniel glanced at her. "Gave you what?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Safety." Her words sank deep into him. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the flames, listening to the crackle. Finally, he said, "You deserve it." Her eyes turned to him, wide and filled with something new. Not fear, not doubt, but a fragile hope. That night, before lying down on the couch, she whispered, "Good night." It was the first time she had ever said it. Daniel smiled in the dark, replying, "Good night, Lyra." From then on, the fear in her eyes dimmed little. By little, she still jumped at loud noises. She still kept her distance sometimes, but she was changing. Daniel saw it in the way she carried herself, in the way her shoulders weren't always hunched, in the way her voice no longer cracked every time she spoke. She was still fragile, still broken, but piece by piece, she was mending, and Daniel realized something too. His house no longer felt empty. For years, he had lived in silence, thinking loneliness was his normal life. But now, with Lyra's quiet footsteps, her humming, her soft good nights, the silence was gone. Trust had begun to grow, not only in her heart, but in his as well. The knock on the door the night was cold, the kind of cold that made the wooden walls creak and the windows whistle with the wind. Daniel had just finished setting another log into the fire. The flames danced and filled the small house with a warm glow. Lyra sat near the couch, hugging her knees, her eyes half closed as if she was drifting into sleep. For days, things had been calm, Daniel thought. He had almost allowed himself to believe that maybe no one cared that Lyra had disappeared. Maybe she could stay hidden here forever. But deep inside, he knew life never stayed that simple. Then it happened. A loud knock thundered against the front door. The sound ripped through the quiet house like a gunshot. Lyra jumped, her eyes wide with terror. The color drained from her face, and her body went stiff, trembling as though she had been struck. Knock, knock, knock. Knock. Heavy, deliberate. Not the knock of a friendly neighbor. It was the kind of knock that carried authority and danger. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. Lyra shook her head rapidly, her lips whispering soundless words. "Don't open it, please." Dawn's single quotes. Another knock shook the door, louder this time. A harsh voice followed. "Open up. We know someone is inside." Daniel's stomach twisted. Whoever they weren't just passing by. They knew. Lyra crawled closer to him, clutching his arm with desperate strength. Her eyes shone with raw fear, her voice breaking. "Please, don't let them take me. They'll hurt me. They'll kill me. Please." Her begging voice, trembling and full of pain, dug into Daniel's chest like a blade. He looked toward the door, then back. At her, his mind raced. He could open the door, pretend he knew nothing, hand her over. It would keep him safe. But the sight of her clinging to him, shaking like a trapped bird, made that choice impossible. Another voice shouted from outside, "You are hiding her, the runaway girl. Open the door, human, or we will force our way in." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. Runaway. So they were after her. He glanced at Lyra. Her eyes were wide, her breathing ragged. "I can't go back," she whispered, her tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'd rather die here than go back." The knocking grew harder, rattling the frame. Daniel took a deep breath. He pulled Lyra close and whispered, "Stay behind me. Don't make a sound." She nodded quickly, pressing herself into the shadowy corner of the room, her small frame trembling. Daniel stood tall, walking toward the door with heavy steps. His palms were sweaty, but his jaw was firm. He would not give her up. He pulled the door open just a crack, enough to face the figures outside. 3 men stood there, their uniforms dark and heavy, their eyes sharp with suspicion. One of them pushed forward, his face twisted with impatience. "We're looking for a fugitive, an alien girl. She escaped from her settlement. People like her don't belong out here." Daniel kept his voice calm, though his heart raced. "I live alone. There's no one here but me." The man narrowed his eyes. "We heard voices." Daniel didn't flinch. "You heard the firewood crack." The house makes noise in the wind, but there's no one here." The man stepped closer, trying to push his way inside, but Daniel blocked the door with his shoulder. "You don't have the right to enter without proof," Daniel said firmly. The men exchanged looks. One of them muttered, "He's lying." Daniel felt sweat on his back, but he didn't move. His voice hardened. "Search somewhere else. This. It's my home, and I won't let you barge in just because of a rumor." Behind him, Lyra sat in the shadows, her hands over her mouth to silence her breathing. Every muscle in her body screamed with fear. She knew one wrong move, one sound, and they would drag her away. The man stared at Daniel for a long moment, then spat on the ground. "If we find out you're hiding her, you'll regret it, human." Daniel didn't blink. "Then, I guess, you'll just have to find out." The men lingered a moment longer, then finally turned and walked away into the dark night. Their footsteps crunched against the cold earth until they faded into silence. Daniel closed the door and leaned against it, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The firelight flickered across his face, showing the weight of the decision he had just made. Lyra crawled out from the shadows, her eyes filled with tears. She ran to him, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Why? Why did you protect me? You could have given me away. You could have been safe." Daniel looked at her, his voice steady, his choice clear. "Because you're safe here. And no one deserves to live in fear like that." Her tears spilled over and she buried her face against his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time, she clung to him not out of fear, but out of trust. Daniel wrapped his arms around her gently, his own eyes heavy with the weight of what he had just done. By protecting her, he had made enemies. He had put himself in danger. But in his heart, he knew there was no other choice. The knock on the door had changed everything from now on. The world outside would not forget, and neither would they. A human's choice. The fire had burned low, filling the small house with only a soft flickering glow. Daniel sat in the wooden chair, staring at the door. His mind replayed the moment again and again, the pounding fists, the sharp voices, the threat that still lingered in the night air. Across the room, Lyra sat curled on the couch, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. Her eyes were red from crying, her face pale, but her body trembled less now. She kept looking at him as though she couldn't believe what he had done. Finally, her voice broke the silence. "You risked everything for me." Daniel turned his head. "I couldn't let them take you." Her lips trembled. "But if they find out, they'll punish you too. You could lose everything. Why would you choose that for me?" Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. His eyes locked on hers, steady and calm. "Because some things are worth risking everything for, and you're one of them." Lyra's breath caught. No one had ever said words like that to her. Not her family, not her people, not anyone. For so long she had been told she was worthless, that her life didn't matter. And now, this human, this stranger, was saying she was worth everything. Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but these were different. Softer, lighter. She covered her mouth, trying to hide the sound of her sobs. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "You're not like them. You're not like anyone I've ever known." Daniel gave a small smile. "Maybe that's because I don't see you the way they do. I don't see dirt or weakness. See someone who's suffered enough. And I won't let it happen again." Lyra's heart ached at his words. For the first time, she felt something she thought was impossible: hope. But hope was fragile, and fear returned quickly. "They'll come back," she whispered. "They never stop searching. They'll send more men. They'll take me, and maybe they'll hurt you too. I should leave before it's too late." Daniel shook his head firmly. No, running will only make them hunt you harder. You leave. Now, you'll be alone again, and I won't let that happen. She stared at him, her voice breaking. Then what will you do? Daniel stood, his shadow stretching long in the firelight. I'll protect you, no matter what it takes. The way he said it steady, without hesitation, sent a shiver down her spine. Not of fear, but of something stronger. Trust. The next days were tense. Daniel kept watch, always alert. He repaired the old locks on his doors, checked the windows twice, and even placed tools nearby that could be used as weapons. Lyra helped where she could, though she still moved quietly, always worried she was a burden. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Lyra brought him a cup of water. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. I'm not just afraid anymore, she said. I want to fight too. They come for me, I don't want to hide. I want to stand beside you. Daniel looked at her, surprised by the strength in her words. He saw the change in her eyes. She was still fragile, still wounded, but something inside her had begun to heal. You don't need to fight, Daniel said gently. That's my choice. But Lyra shook her head. No, you already made your choice. You chose to protect me. Now it's my turn to choose. I choose to stay. I choose to trust you. The words struck Daniel deeply. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear them until now. He gave her a small nod. Then we'll face it together. That night, as the wind howled outside, Daniel and Lyra sat by the fire. For the first time, the silence between them wasn't heavy with fear. It was filled with something new belonging. But fate wasn't finished testing them near midnight. Another sound echoed outside, footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. Lyra's body tensed, her hands clutching the blanket tight. Daniel stood, his heart pounding, ready for another knock. But this time, the footsteps faded. Whoever it was, they passed by without stopping. The danger wasn't gone, only delayed. Lyra whispered, "They'll always look for me, won't they?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, but they'll never find you here, because I won't let them." She looked at him, her eyes wide, shimmering. In the firelight, her voice was soft but certain. "Then this house is my home now." Daniel felt something warm settle in his chest, a strange comfort. He reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch this time. Instead, she leaned closer, her tears soaking into his sleeve. For the first time in her life, Lyra wasn't begging for a place to stay. She wasn't begging for food or water. She wasn't begging for safety. She had been given those things freely by a human who saw her as more than worthless. And Daniel, sitting there with her in the glow of the fire, realized something too. His choice had been made long ago, the moment he opened the bathroom door and saw her trembling under the shower. He had chosen humanity, the kind written in books or laws, but the kind found in small acts of kindness, in the decision to protect someone who had nothing. As the fire burned low and the night stretched on, Daniel whispered the words that sealed his choice. "You're not alone anymore, Lyra. Not ever again." And with that, the girl who once begged for a shower, who had been cast aside and forgotten, finally found the one thing she never thought possible: home.